Biggly Piggly Wiggly on Spring Street has served 3 generations of shoppers since 1955 as the largest locally owned independent grocery store in the area. The Joseph family owners grew up here, so you know they're invested in the community. They provide the biggest variety of choice meats, the freshest produce, an in-house deli bakery, great wine selection, and more of your favorite brands. Every purchase gives you gasoline points so you can save at our pumps. Order online for pickup at bigglypigglywiggly.com. Biggly Piggly Wiggly on Spring Street. No one beats the pig.
The opinions expressed on Scoop Squad Truth Pod are those of the hosts and the guests and not those of WVRC Media. The Scoop Squad Truth Pod, copyright 2024. Scoop Squad Truth Squad, LLC.
And you're listening to the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. Hashtag the only Charleston, West Virginia podcast that matters. And the reason that we can say that is because we have sponsors who pay for us to have lots of time to talk. And so that's what we do. We talk and we bring information and we bring stories that, stories from West Virginia, from Charleston, West Virginia, from Kanawha County and surrounding counties. And we bring those stories and that information that the local television stations either can't bring you or don't have time to bring you or don't want to bring you. So we think this is a pretty important platform, and we're just very humbled and lucky to be here. And Ron doesn't have a microphone, so he's going to be stealing mine, which is very annoying.
Oh, you like it. So anyway, we found that we call ourselves the only Charleston WV podcast that matters because we can go deep into subjects, for an hour, and nobody really can do that. We can dig in a little bit deeper. People can talk to us, and they can talk to us anonymously. We're not journalists. We do uphold journalistic principles, but we are not journalists. We are more commentators and investigators.
Yeah, I mean, we behave ourselves, in spite of what some people might say. Okay, so speaking of sponsors, we have a sponsor in the studio with us tonight. We have Elisa Payne, and her shop, Eggplant, is a sponsor of this podcast. And I would just like to mention, I'm going to lose my voice, so just all bear with me if I have to clear my throat. We've got Integrity Insurance, Chris Walters on Capitol Street, who has pet insurance. And what else, Ron?
Well, home, life, business insurance, and he's also running for county commissioner. And he may be the only candidate for that office that makes sense and also has experience. Let's
say Kanawha County Commissioner, because we have another sponsor, Jody Pastori, who's running for Lincoln County Commissioner, and he is also a sponsor.
We have two. They just by coincidence, we don't go after people that are running for office. They just want to advertise with us because their businesses get results from it. And also Biggly Piggly Wiggly, who's one of our most recent sponsors, and they are probably the most interesting grocery store in the area, family-owned, locally owned since the 1950s, and you can find about anything there that you would need.
Yeah, and we've also got Claudette Hudson and T-Graphics over on the west side. Just a shout-out to our sponsors right off the top. Okay, so we're going to spend the first scoop or scoop and a half talking to someone who has been on our podcast before several weeks ago, and that is Max Fisher. And Max Fisher is he came to the podcast a few months ago to talk about his solidarity trip that he took on behalf of Faith and Freedom, West Virginia Faith and Freedom, to Israel. He's got a very long list of accomplishments and credentials. So he's been at the Capitol this legislative session lobbying on behalf of, can I say, West Virginia Faith and Freedom. And then something that I can't believe I missed, and I told him this before the podcast, but he completed a 780-page research paper on political processes, corruption, topical issues, and analysis of West Virginia's primary business sectors. Tell me how I missed that. It's the first thing that you see. I don't know how. Maybe it just didn't compute. But for some reason, I didn't ask you about that. And I probably won't read that 780-page research paper.
Space, so don't worry about it.
Okay. But, at some point, I want you to give me the Cliff Notes, like the abbreviated version of what you found. But the reason that we asked you back is because you are co-founder and deputy director and board member of War Dog Guardians, which is a nonprofit focusing on rescuing former military dogs and placing them with American war veterans. And that is the capacity that you come here tonight. So let's just dive into that. Tell me about how this nonprofit got started and what's going on with it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. This is the first podcast that Mariah and I have done ever.
And we've got Mariah. I didn't even mention Mariah. Can you introduce Mariah to our listeners?
Sure, absolutely. How do I introduce a woman who does such incredible work in such a challenging field? Mariah has been in the dog and canine world for 20 plus years, right? 20 to 25 years in many theaters of war as a subcontractor in many different military branches. She is has been involved with dog breeding and dog training and training handlers and being overseas and being in war zones. And
all that with a 5-year-old. You've got a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Yes. And she also really... she was de facto doing War Dog Guardians before I ever met her, because she, on her own time and her own dime, has been saving hundreds and hundreds of war dogs and trying to get them placed and trying to get them off of death row when they end up in shelters. And she will be best to tell you, obviously, her story, which I'm sure she's going to do. But Mariah and I met... really completely accidentally.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
Well, I was actually, funny that you say it, I was doing my research, and I was was at the Bavarian Inn in West Virginia holding a meeting, and then I had a couple of hours of time, and it was a Saturday, and I really wanted to get a dog. I grew up with dogs. I've always loved dogs, but I was like, how am I going to get a dog? I travel everywhere. I do this and I do that. And I was kind of bored, and I was Googling German Shepherd puppies, and Mariah's business popped up. Gladiator Allegiance.
Hello, Mariah.
Hi.
So I called, and she answered, and then we kind of both figured out that I was about like 2.5 miles away.
Oh, wow.
And then she's like, I have the perfect... And this is something that I love about Mariah, which is that she just knows things about dogs, and she just says things, and they just end up being true. And she goes, I have a dog for you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I have a Malinois here. I had never had any experience with Belgian Malinois before. Of course, I heard about them on television. I heard about them on Instagram. And I was like, listen, I grew up, my uncle had a German Shepherd. My granduncle had a German Shepherd. Belgian Malinois look amazing, but I mean, that's just too much dog for me. And she was like, no, I have the perfect dog for you. And I was like, well, can I come over? And most people in business on a Saturday would say, no, make an appointment, come back.
Right.
And she was like, yeah, just come over right now. So I literally drove 2.5 miles, met Mariah. She brought out Athena, who was the first Belgian Malinois that I adopted. And I went walking with her.
Let's back up one second, because I got a funny story to tell about this. So when he called me, I was listening to his voice, and I said, okay, this guy's either a politician or he's a lawyer. So that was my first two things, right? So good, right? In my area in Jefferson County, they've been trying to get me to run for politics for the last 5 years. And I wasn't ready yet. And so I figured this is their way of getting to me, is this guy's coming here, and he's going to try to get me to join politics. So when Max shows up, and he gets out of the car, because he wants a German Shepherd. I'm going to throw him out at him, and he's not going to do it. So I'm going to call him on his bluff, right? So that was the whole plan. And then he gets out of the car, and I said, oh, boy, he's a politician or a lawyer. So I already knew right there. And then we met. And
I'm neither, by the way.
I know, right? Exactly.
So you know dogs, but you don't know people.
Right, exactly. So I was like, but he's very good at, he's very good. So I was like, okay. So then, like he says, go ahead and fish. But I showed him Athena. At that time, her name was Cookie. and she had a pretty rough life in the war. And there was two that came in a pair. It was Cage and Athena, who he has now. But go ahead and tell your side, and then we'll charm me in.
So I see Athena, and I just go walking with her on Mariah's land, which is a lot of farmland outside of Shepherdstown. And I said, okay. I said, well, look, let me kind of mull this over for a week, and I can be back in a week. And then, why don't we take this slow, and I can sign some documents and take her for a couple of weeks or take her for a month, see how it goes, and see if this works, if this is going to work for both of us. And Mariah said, okay. So then I came back about a week later, and I went walking with Athena again. And then Athena just she just jumped up on me. And then at some point, Mariah was like, all right, well, do you want to fill out this paperwork to take her for 4 weeks? I said, no. I said, we're done. This is over. I'm taking her.
Oh.
She jumped in the back of my car, and I said, we're done. This is a done deal. We're wrapping this up. So that was part one with Athena. And then so the first place that Athena and I went to was to Assateague Beach on the Maryland shore. And I still have photographs and a video of it. And then I immediately had to go to Miami. So we had a road trip right afterwards where she was looking at me for the first week like, who are you? I'm like, what are we doing exactly? And she would sit in the back seat and just kind of give me this look. And but it was a road trip, and it was hotels, and it was the rest of it. And then so we had a great road trip. We went down to Miami. We went swimming in the water, in the ocean, which was incredible. She started chasing iguanas there. I had a political event to go down there with a lot of Miami politicians, like on the Republican side. And so I took her with me, and she started going everywhere that I would go. So that was that. And then I'm going to finish up Cage, and then we'll get to you. So then I understood that she was kenneled with Cage in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And I was like, there's no way that I'm taking two Malinois. That's not going to happen. I said a lot of things. They would never sleep in my bed.
Right.
And I mean, it's all over. But so I said, but listen, I said, let me find a home for Cage, somebody that I know, and then they can see each other when they can see each other, and we can still kind of keep Cage in our orbit. And so that didn't quite work out. Well, rather, I found somebody who was kind of interested, but this lady's mother asked me a very good question. She said, listen, I'm very concerned about my 3 grandkids being around a war dog male Malinois. And I said, that's not a bad thing to say. It makes perfect sense. So I said, well, why don't I take him for a couple of weeks and check him out myself? So when I went back to Mariah's place, so the way he looked at her,
Cage,
when we came in, he was like Samson, man. He was pawing at the kennel, and he was going to just bring the whole place down.
To get to her. And I kind of looked at him, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to keep you too. Yeah.
Right? So then he jumped in my car. So then, they played, and I went on a walk with him and all that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take him as well. So he jumped in my car, and then we went to Shepherdstown to go get lunch, and I was sitting there, and I was like, what am I doing?
What have I done?
What have I done? I've got these 2 very, big dogs.
Yeah. They're big dogs.
They are big, but they're big in personality.
Very big in personality,
and everything that they've done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then
that's a great story.
But let's just say that I knew that you would take both of them because
oh, I'm sure you did.
Because people.
Well, but who could resist that reaction from Cage?
Well, they'd never been separated, and then when he took Athena, she cried for the first 2 days when he left. It was really weird. The first time she met him, she watched him leave out the driveway, and she cried the whole night. And I looked at my husband and I said, she's never cried like this. And then I said, it's really weird. She doesn't even know this guy. And then he came back again, walked her again, and it was over. And she got in the car with him. But then Cage was really depressed. And I said, buddy, because they were mates for the whole time they were in Afghanistan, the same pen. when they were in the shelter together, they got separated, then they brought back together again, then separated again, and then they found me. So it was kind of like, I didn't want to separate them again, but I knew that he probably wasn't going to take at that time Cage.
Right. There was no way.
Yeah. I mean, he was only he barely wanted Mal. And then when he saw how good, I had trained her at that point to get her, because when I first got her, no one could touch her. She would tear your face off. There was no way. Man. And if you saw her today, she's the biggest sweetheart.
I have seen her. They're both very sweet.
So it took me 4 months to get them both trained together to where they weren't fighting over each other or over food or whichever. Right. And then they both just fell in love with him. Wow. So there was no denying that was meant to happen.
I mean, it's no easy task to home animals. It's really not. I mean, my daughter's a huge advocate and has partnered with the Charleston Humane Department to, she just held an event called Morgan Switzer for Pawsecutor. Get it?
Yep.
Pawsecutor.
That's perfect.
I told her it was possum. That was a possum idea.
Yes.
It's a bad joke. But it's not easy.
No, I cry every time.
Yeah.
So there's no, even if I don't bond with them, I cry because it's just, you have to say goodbye at some point.
So have Cage and Athena, clearly they've had trauma.
Yes.
Right? So did you out-train them of that trauma?
So the first 6 months that I had them when, so they've had a pretty traumatic story. So they did their time at war. Cage was wounded in war. He was shot and blown up. He had damage to his hip and his leg. His handler was killed in action. So he laid on top of his handler for 2 hours until rescue could come. So he was very traumatized at that. But then when he was rescued from a shelter by a guy, that gentleman had OD'd. And those dogs were in that bathroom with that gentleman for probably about a week and a half, several days, week and a half, with that gentleman's body. So that was traumatizing because then they were taken from him. Mm-hmm. And then I think now I see a difference in them since he's got them. They realize now that this is because with me, they knew that I was a home, but I don't think they ever sensed a permanency with me because I was always working them and other dogs. So they never felt like this is my mom per se.
Right.
But there was a bond there because I rescued them from another traumatic area and I just loved on them for months. Like I said, I was the only one that could touch Athena.
How did you get into that? I mean, how did you get into the overseas and the combat and the military?
Well, I was in Alaska. I was a young girl, I think it just turned 19, 20 years old. And I was one of the best dog trainers. I could train a dog to find anything. No, just public general. The police would use me, bed bugs, all kinds of things. I mean, I could train a dog to find anything. So at that time, when Iraq had happened, they were coming around looking for trainers to not be in the military per se, but just train these dogs up because they had to train 350 dogs within a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And my dad was prior military, so a connection that knew me said, hey, they're looking for people. I'm going to bring this guy to you. I went through the whole interrogation process. I went through a boot camp. I did everything that you're supposed to do. I just wasn't supposed to go to war.
So you were in the military then?
No, I was a contractor for the military.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So I did all contract stuff. I started to go through boot camps and do some, some pretty intense training like the military would because of the K-9 department and things like that, working with explosives. And so I did have to go through an extensive training background. But so then I realized when I signed that contract that said I was going to train 350 dogs, I did not really read it. And it's, next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Iraq.
Holy
as a kennel master. So
how old were you at that point?
I think I was 22 maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, at that point. So I was over there. I was very young and naive and never, set boots on the ground in a war zone and scared to death.
Were you freaking out?
Yeah. But again, I was more worried about my dad at home because he had Alzheimer's and he was still pretty young. And so I had to leave him with a friend because I was the only one he had and he was all I had. So I was more focused on him for a long time than anything because I knew I wasn't going home for a while.
How long was it, Mariah?
My first deployment was 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So I missed the majority of the shorter years of his Alzheimer's, which is probably kind of good for me at the same sense. But so I was dealing with a war zone then, and then when I would come home to see him, I was dealing with a war here because of him. So it was constant trauma for me. So I started training all these dogs up, got them ready for war, went and worked them overseas, and it started all from there. My love for dogs and for veterans and for that type of life, because my dad was a veteran.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure these dogs came home too, and their handlers. So when I came home from the war, and I was permanently home, is when I said I would go work jobs with contract companies, but I wasn't being fulfilled. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start my own company, and I'm going to rescue dogs from shelters that I can prove that have been to war, because I trained those dogs. Mm-hmm. So I have touched physically every leash that a dog that had been to war at some point, whether that was with the Air Force or Marines or whoever. So I'd find war dogs, and some had chips, some had ear, tags, lip tags, whichever. And I would try to place them where I saw them or where they went to war. And I would pull them from shelters. I would pay for all this out of my own pocket.
Gosh, you must have been all over.
Yeah. I mean, I would drive to Texas. I would drive to California. I would drive wherever I had to get a dog.
Wow.
And I would do that. And then soon my name started getting out there. Hey, this girl rescues mals that, been to war, and so people would reach out to me and say, hey, I bought a war dog and I can't handle it. So then it started going from there. So to this date, I've rescued over 1,500 dogs by myself, and have placed them in homes or with veterans. And that's when I kind of started War Dog Guardians. I didn't really have a name. It was just, I would do canines for veterans, or I would just, I would kind of just do my own thing. And I would rescue these dogs and pair them up with kids, veterans. I'm the only nonprofit now that will actually team up a veteran dog with a veteran's child with disabilities or something, because no other canine profit does that. They don't work with the wives or the spouse, the spouses or the children of the veteran. It's just the veteran. So I kind of wanted to broaden that, because it's not the child's fault.
Right.
Children of veterans have traumas too.
Absolutely.
Some have medical issues. So I wanted to be different, and I wanted to set out and fix the issues that were really going on.
Yeah.
With our nonprofit.
Wow. I can imagine that is so heartbreaking, but so rewarding as well. And
I couldn't have done it without this man right here. Max completely changed my life, and we've become family. I mean, he's my...
So how did that happen? Like, tell me how you guys decided to merge this.
So when he saw what I was doing, he says, Mariah, you're doing this all on your own. Who pays these medical bills for these dogs? And I said, well, I do. And I think the third time I met you, I think I showed you a vet bill. I think it was like $8,000 or $6,000. And he's like, how do you do that? And I just say, my husband really loves me, because, he obviously puts up with a lot that I deal with. And I get no donations. I never got a blanket donated, never got a dog toy. This was all out of my pocket.
Wow.
And, so when I met him, I said, I said, Max, I've been doing this on my own. And I said, but I don't have the structure or the people, because I'm not from West Virginia. I'm from Alaska.
Right.
So, I don't know people in West Virginia that could help start this. And Max is like, I do. Yeah. Like, I have people here that I know, that I trust. I meet a lot of people with what I do. And within 3 months, it takes a nonprofit to get started. It takes a year to even just build the infrastructure of a nonprofit. And we did it in 3 months.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so I just saw what Mariah was doing with her own drive and her own money. And I just thought to myself, this is amazing, but highly inefficient.
Right.
So
exactly.
And I mean that in the best way. I mean, it's
guess.
really a testament to how much work you've done. So I was able to get, people involved, like a treasurer, an accountant, and an attorney.
Yeah, that's a complicated process.
Together, and to get some people associated with the nonprofit that communications people and volunteers and people that eventually we will also build a C4 to do advocacy from War Dog Guardians. Mm-hmm. We're not quite there yet, but we have those people in place. And so we are waiting for our own 501c3. We have a parent company right now that sponsors us, so we're completely able to take donations. Mm-hmm. But that is a process that, it just is what it is. Mm-hmm. You apply, and you have to wait until it comes through, unless they say something's wrong or whatever. So so we're waiting for that. But I was able to bring a lot of really smart, energetic people who all love dogs, love animals, and wanted to be part of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of basically how that happened. And I think that in the beginning. So before I say this, I will say that I took the dogs with me to lobbying every single day, almost at the Capitol. And so Cage is like the most popular dog in the Capitol.
I bet.
Point.
I'm sure.
Actually, well, your daughter met him. I just,
and said she probably loved him.
Yeah, she definitely did.
Mm-hmm.
So all the Capitol Police there know him, and they know his story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a lot of fun because I take her as well, but he's very extroverted, so he loves to go there. He loves to work.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was great because nobody denied me a meeting with me.
That's
nobody
right.
did. So it was pretty
Great
incredible.
strategy.
It is. And I know that there is a bill that got started by Debbie Warner that I don't think is going to make it this session, but I think that next session it will become a priority, which is to get a canine in every school in West Virginia. That's something that
for safety.
Debbie Warner wanted to do.
For safety.
Well, not only safety, but
they're therapeutic. They're therapeutic. It's safety.
Animals are therapeutic for sure.
Without a doubt, but this was specifically also designated for a handler and a German Shepherd or a Malinois or whatever, any kind of protection dog, because as I'm sure everybody here knows that there have been school shootings in this country, and generally the way that these things work is that whoever is going to do that is going to look for a soft target. And even just seeing a handler and a dog is just going to...
It's a deterrent.
It's a huge deterrent. Yeah. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of value that for the time involved and for the cause. So I think that next time it's gonna be front and center. So
would that could that require a war dog, or would you have to retrain, or would that require a whole
No, my goal is to use war dogs. Find them in shelters, repurpose them, save money for the state, for the county, for us, and do it the right way. Because the problem is these companies go out, which one thing I want to mention to you with the war and things like that, is how these dogs get brought into shelters and put in very bad situations that the tax dollars paid for. Okay, your tax dollars paid for those dogs to go to war. You're talking millions of dollars, okay, plus. So when they're done with them, these companies just throw these dogs away like they're nothing. These dogs are war heroes. These dogs have saved lives, countless lives.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you educate everybody on sort of the difference between an actual branch dog, like a Marine dog that is owned by the Marines, and the subcontracting world, and what they do to these dogs after they're done with their service?
And Mariah, can you do that after we come back from the break?
Yeah.
All right, because it's a good time for a break. I'm going to drink some water, and we will be back with the second scoop in just a minute.
The Scoop Squad Truth Pod would like to thank our sponsors. Those include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, featuring auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance. Pet insurance, you say? That's health insurance for your dogs or cats that covers special foods, illnesses, surgeries, and medication. They're on 16 Capitol Street in Charleston at 346-9181, or reach them at www.iigwv.com. Also by Jody's Mobile Services, offering steam cleaning, pressure washing, fleet washing, and auto detailing. We come to you. They're at 304-437-3164. And also by Eggplant on Bridge Road. Anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T-Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street, 345-4816. Go to tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery since 1984. Again at 345-4816.
And you're back with the second scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. Elisa came across a video last night of how crazy is that? I'll put it on the site. And what is it again? Video of war dogs. Okay.
Yeah, I'll look at it. It'd be cool to see.
That's awesome. All right, so
how do these companies end up with the dogs once they leave military service?
Yeah, and before you answer that question, why don't you tell us what Max was the differentiate between the dogs?
So like let's say when the Iraq war happened, okay, these private companies came in and said, we're canine companies, we have these dogs, or we can acquire dogs, okay? These are not dogs that are active duty military, okay, on a military base given to a military handler, like an Air Force handler out of Lackland, okay? Those are military dogs. The only difference is These dogs are military trained in the private sector, okay? And they become contract dogs just like me. I'm a contractor, they're a contractor, but they're trained for the military, okay? The same job the military dogs do. These are just in a war zone, not on a military base, okay? That's the difference. They're still a war dog. They still go the same training. They're still given the same honors, most of them. But the problem is when you have these private contract companies like that I worked for, would buy these dogs, like when Iraq War happened, they spent $5 million. They bid on a government contract for Iraq War. We're going to supply the Iraq War 350 dogs for $5.5 million, okay? They were awarded that contract, which is taxpayer dollars because it comes from the government, funding. So then these dogs are all bought. They're trained up by people like me, other handlers, and then they go to war. When they come back, most of the dogs, like when Biden pulled out in 21, he left all those dogs in Afghanistan. I was able to retrieve most of those dogs back by a private company that reached out to me that said, we will bring some of those dogs back for you. And I was grateful for that. But a lot of them were tortured. A lot of them were killed. They were left in kennels to starve to death. The ones that the Taliban didn't get that were tortured were let free to go, just roam the streets of Afghanistan. There is a guy over there that I have talked to on the phone that has rescued some of those dogs, and he feeds them. He's just a local Afghani guy, great guy. So I was kind of rest assured on that. But these companies buy these dogs, and then when the war is done, they just dispose of them like they're nothing. Yeah. They're thrown in shelters. They're killed. They're, sent off to be, some just let them out on the side of the road, let them go. So thank God that I've touched most of them so I can find out proven if they're, a war dog or not. Right. Most times. Sometimes they might be kin of one. Either way, I want that dog because I don't think it should just go to anybody that's going to end up in a shelter. Right. So I try to rescue them when I can. But yes, that is a difference, and that people don't realize that our tax dollars paid for those war veterans.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
So it's a really sad situation that our funds are misplaced like that and then abused to that fact. And this is a living, breathing animal. This is not, a piece of clothing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an animal lover. I'm not a dog lover, but I can't imagine that at all. It's unfathomable.
When we do get the C4 part of War Dog Guardians up and running, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're going to try to advocate for is that if you have subcontracting companies that are getting multi-million-dollar contracts, the condition there has got to be that there's got to be a plan as to what to do with these dogs
after they serve. Yeah.
So there are other places that these dogs can go. One of them could be War Dog Guardians.
Right.
And it just means that they have some sort of life or a chance at a life after service.
Yeah.
And I think so. Before I met Mariah, I mean, I didn't know any of this whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I found
not anybody really would. Mm-mm.
I didn't, and something I actually forgot to mention, and I don't even know if I ever told you, Mariah, but when I specifically, this is important for me, when I specifically, when I talked to Mariah, when I went over there, and I knew that those dogs were in Afghanistan. So for me personally, I wasn't born in this country. We were talking about this when I was here last time. I'm from the former Soviet Union. I came to this country when I was 4 years old with my mother. I saw the pullout of Afghanistan on television. That was the day for me that I said, you know what, in 100, 200, 500 years, if this country falls and is not what it is anymore, and they say, what date did that happen? That's the date that I would point to. Mm-hmm. That was a disgusting incident in America's history. So when I heard that these dogs were in Afghanistan, it was it definitely played a part. Where, like first with Athena, and then Cage, and it was like, this is the
it was a duty or an obligation.
Yeah, this is the little obligation. Yeah. They fell into my world. They fell into my life
for a reason.
Mm-hmm. This is the little thing that I can do to ensure that this country does not have some kind of culture of just throwing the vets away, throwing the dogs away, never mind the military equipment, never mind our allies and everything else, after 20-some wars and America's longest war. So,
Interesting. I'd like to go back to that point where you talked about the pullout of Afghanistan, and that would be the pivotal moment that you would look back at. Why do you say that?
Because I think that if you're going to have a society, if you're going to have a continuation of a country and its tradition and its way of being and Americanism, you need to have adults that build things that are going to outlast them. You have to have a long vision for your country and for your culture and for the philosophies that underpin that country or culture. And when a country can just simply, after 20 years of war, irrespective of what people think about that war, irrespective of whether we should have left 3,500 people there, troops there as a residual force, completely different conversations that are all fine to have. The way that pullout was orchestrated was absolutely disgraceful.
Right.
And it showed me that there is nobody home in the United States government at the top end.
Do you think this situation was worse than our pullout in 1975 at South Vietnam? Are you familiar with any of that?
So I wasn't exactly around for that, but I think that I have read a lot about the Vietnam War, and I think that the pullout there was very tragic as well. But I don't know enough about it to really compare and contrast. But I do know that in the Afghan pullout, it did not take much. It would not have taken that much to orchestrate it a lot better than it happened.
Right. And I can honestly say that I've sat down and talked with Vietnam vets at the VA when dealing with my nonprofit here, and we talked about excuse me. We talked about the difference between Afghanistan and Iraq, and how the wars are so similar with how they pulled out. Vietnam guys don't understand that, but they know the trauma in the faces of other people that they see. And these war vets talk at the VA hospital. And it relatively, from what I'm understanding, it was the way that the Vietnam veterans were treated when they came back from the war.
They were treated horribly.
Yes.
They were booed and spit on when
stuff
they
thrown
came
at them.
home.
And I will tell you that I've witnessed soldiers that I've defended in an airport just literally 2 years ago being disrespected in their uniform, sitting there. And I was appalled. And these men fight for this woman to have her. And the veteran did tell her, you have every right to feel how you feel. I fought for your freedom to have that right, but you don't need to come at me that way. So our veterans today for the Afghan War and for the Vietnam War are still kind of treated the same. It's just in a different level.
Right. Probably a little different intensity, I think.
Yes.
For the most part, and the worst part, was that they were ignored.
Yes.
Just like this never happened. Everybody wanted to forget about it.
Yes.
But when we pulled out of South Vietnam in 1975, the communist troops were coming into the city as we were leaving. We were just leaving our allies there, our people that had worked for us. We just left them, got on helicopters, and they were clamoring to come with us,
Yes.
for safety, and we just left them.
And I will tell you that we had interpreters in Afghanistan and Iraq that were the same way. I am proud to say that my husband was part of a plan to bring his interpreter to the United States, and his interpreter was able to become a United States citizen. So there are some positives, but there was a lot of people, you're right, that were still left there in this same war too. They were left behind, that they wanted, because they know they're going to get killed because they helped us.
Right, that's right. It was a death sentence.
Yes.
And you have to lay that at the feet of the administration.
Right. And it's the same with the dogs. They left them in these cages to be, their paws were cut off. Their body parts were cut off and mailed to, I got a story from a guy at the Pentagon that there were some paws that arrived at the Pentagon that were mailed. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these dogs were tortured, the same as some, if soldiers would have been left there, it would have been the same story.
That's horrible. Are there other nonprofits like yours around the country, or are you guys the only one that is doing what you're doing?
So I am the only one that I know of to this date.
Wow.
That rescues war dogs. And that definitely repurposes them for what I'm doing. How
many do you think you've totally rescued altogether?
Altogether, I would say right now my number is probably almost 2,000.
And you're the only one?
I'm the only one. So there are other veteran nonprofits out there, but they mostly help the veteran. There's a couple that, again, I wouldn't want to team up with them just because what I want to do is different. Like I want to, eventually my goal is to be able to give veterans jobs within my nonprofit. Right. Whether that's working in a school with a dog to protect children, because there are a lot of veterans that said we will step up during these school shootings.
Yeah, exactly right. They did.
Yeah, they said we will step up and come and volunteer for free and protect these kids.
Yeah,
the state and the city and the government said no, we don't want that. So I want to team up with veterans that want a job to protect children, to protect public spaces, and put dogs in that scenario with them, just like they're working in a war zone again, like they were. Most of these guys are prior handlers, a lot of them. But if I find a veteran that I can teach to work a leash, I will do that and give him a job.
Yeah.
My other goal for Max and I is we want to get into the sex trafficking trade. We want to use these dogs to find these children, whether that's container ships, whether that's in foreign countries. Yeah. We want to be able to team up and do different things.
Wow.
Yeah, in our own country.
Yeah, in our own country for sure. Yeah. Wow, you've got some lofty goals and dreams, and I'm on board. I mean,
I'd love to have you help us.
Kudos to you all for what you do. So you talked about the bill. So why do you think it didn't get any traction? Is it just because was it just introduced?
I think it was introduced too late.
Okay.
And I think that I mean, Delegate Warner had all the best intentions and still does, but it just the reality of getting bills during session.
It's hard.
There's a lot of them, and there's a time thing, and there's an attention span thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that it just, the idea that we discussed just got there a little bit too late.
Yeah.
And now what that does is that it allows us to try to work on it to get it right
at the beginning of next session. Yeah.
Exactly.
That would be fabulous.
Yeah, and that's true too.
Yeah. So where can our listeners, I mean, do you guys take donations? I mean, like where's your funding coming from right now?
So the website is wardogguardians.org, right? Okay. So www.wardogguardians.org.
Okay. We'll put that on the Facebook page as well.
Yep. And, we would love people to go to our website and share it. We would love people to go there. There's a big donate button. You can press on that. And again, right now, we are totally equipped to take in donations. It's just through a parent 501c3. But all of that information is there on our website. And as soon as we get our own, I think we'll be able to move faster for reasons that I'm not going to bore you with right now. But we'll be able to move faster with donations. But right now, we're doing what it is that we can. And we're focusing a lot right now on VA centers. And I think Lions Club, Rotary Club,
VFWs.
And sort of, Mariah and I, or one of us or whatever, can go and give a talk. We bring a couple of dogs. We talk about the story. And and that's generally how that happens.
Do you guys ever do you ever hook up with police departments for canine?
So I do a lot of their training. So they just use me for their training.
Okay.
Because again, I'm a dog trainer. So and sometimes I take my dog to train with them. But that's going to come into works because that's a difference between, state and county laws and rules.
Right.
Most, law enforcement, when they find out that there's an active dog that's out there, and what we do, they might reach out and say, hey, can you help us? Our bomb dog's down right now, or whichever. So if my bomb dog is available, I'll take my dog and go help. But that's been a couple years now. I've kind of taken a step back to try to work on the nonprofit in the last 6 months. So, but yeah, I mean, there's always, that would be our ultimate goal too, is to team up with law enforcement when we start working with the schools. Yeah. Because I think they are a huge part, and they're very busy. So these schools are neglected when it comes to safety. So I'd like to team up with the law enforcement and get them involved with us. Yes.
Interesting.
So when Mariah just mentioned human trafficking, so Faith and Freedom, that is a big item for them now, which is human trafficking. And there's a bill currently right now that was introduced by Brandon Steele in the House. I believe the number is 4666, and it passed the House. It's in the Senate right now. And I know that it's got a lot of Senate support. It's just has got to get pushed through and done. And I hope that will happen today or tomorrow.
And what is the nature of the bill?
It is increasing penalties for human trafficking in West Virginia, and the part of the research that I did, a little part of it was about human trafficking in West Virginia and what it looks like, because it looks different in every state. It looks different in border states than it does here in West Virginia, but that's kind of another topic. But there are gosh, what do you even call it? There are now sort of private citizens leading the charge against human trafficking that are outside of state police. They work with state police or FBI or whatever, but they're not actually in those departments right now.
Yeah, they're private, right?
They're private, and eventually, I mean, we would love to team up with them with some of our super dogs that can do that kind of work, whether it's going to be tracking or whatever else.
And I have been reached out to last month. I didn't get to talk to Max about this yet, but I was reached out to from a guy in he actually lives in Virginia. He's prior military. His daughter was almost trafficked last month via like a Snapchat group, like a gaming system group. So he reached out to me saying, how do I, can you help me with this? And I kind of gave him some tips and told him what to do. But this is a real thing. I mean, social media has made it very easy for them to find out where your child lives just by them posting the picture of them.
So what tips did you give him? What tips did you give him?
Well, I told him she can't be posting pictures of herself anymore, because what she did is she posted a picture of her with her new kitten in front of her house, and all he did was take that Google image and found her house through that Google image. So it's very easy for them to find your children with a minute picture that you may have, or they can find out where you work.
We also had we had a guest on several months ago. What was his name, Ron? Who he portrayed like children, all of you who would portray or pretend to be children to lure sex predators. And he mentioned that Snapchat was the worst social media app.
And he's caught several hundred of them.
Yes. But what's really bad, though, is when these private guys do this, they reach out to the police departments, and sometimes the police departments are like, well, you did this, not our detectives, but it shouldn't matter who's the king tut here. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. The fact is this guy has the evidence. Arrest the predator. You know, but they're kind of making it like, well, our detectives have to do this now, and they got to interrogate this guy and go home and get his computers. Well, that's fine and dandy. But, so these private guys are having a hard time bridging that gap with law enforcement.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, but he did say that Snapchat was the worst social media app that a child could have. So it's a scary world out there. I've got a 12-year-old.
Yes, China does not allow it, right?
I mean, what'd you say, Elisa? You chimed in. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to warn you about that too. So TikTok is the same thing. TikTok was a China-based social media, and Chinese are not allowed to have their own TikTok.
Yeah. It's crazy. Hey, thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for making the trip from beautiful Shepherdstown.
Absolutely.
Next time I'm up there, I'm going to call you.
Yes, come see my dogs.
And come walk the dogs. I'll bring my daughter with me.
And speaking of that, if you know anybody who wants a dog, I do have several for homes. So if you guys can put the word out, I will always have rescues that need homes. And the website. Absolutely, it's wardogguardians.org.
Okay.
www.wardogguardians.org.
Okay, we'll put a link on our Facebook page too.
And I gave you my business card. So if you find anyone who wants a puppy or a dog, or just reach out to me. I have all kinds, from Dobermans to Shepherds to Mals to...
Oh, gosh. My daughter had a Doberman. She had him for 10 years. He just died. And I think it was November. She rescued from the Humane Society. Little Charlotte's now part of our family. she's an old dog, but she's such a good... I mean, you know when you know.
You know.
And she had fostered a dog before Charlotte. And we knew that wasn't the right fit. We love that dog, and we found that dog a home. But Charlotte was a perfect
just now know
fit.
You got a trainer in me, so give me a call and I'll help you.
All right. Hey, thank you guys again for coming in. And I hope you'll come back.
Oh, yeah.
And we will be back with the third scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod in just a minute.
The Scoop Squad Truth Pod would like to thank our sponsors. Those include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, featuring auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance. Pet insurance, you say? That's health insurance for your dogs or cats that covers special foods, illnesses, surgeries, and medication. They're on 16 Capitol Street in Charleston at 346-9181, or reach them at www.iigwv.com. Also by Jody's Mobile Services, offering steam cleaning, pressure washing, fleet washing, and auto detailing. We come to you. They're at 304-437-3164. And also by Eggplant on Bridge Road. Anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street, 345-4816. Go to tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery since 1984. Again at 345-4816.
And we're back with a third scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. It is February 28th. I think March is going to go out like, or March is going to come in like, what do you think? Finish the sentence. March will come in like.
Well, I think March will come in by Monday. It'll be like back to 70. So it'll come in like a lamb.
You think it's going to come in like a lamb?
And then it will go out like a lion, like it usually does.
You think so?
With a blizzard or something.
What do you think, Elisa?
I literally just get my weather from my customers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're out in it. They'll tell you.
You're in the store all day.
By the way, when they were
know.
talking about that $5 million for 350 dogs, that comes out to be almost $14,300 per dog.
Wow.
That's invested. These
they
companies
just
discard
them after
when the tour is over. They just threw the dogs out.
Well, we were looking at some pictures of the dogs in combat and some videos during the break. And we're going to post those because those really are
phenomenal.
I mean, they're phenomenal. And like we said, God is amazing.
He is.
I mean, He created these creatures. He created us. I mean, He never ceases to amaze me, even with the weather. You know what I mean? Like that storm came in. That storm came in today, and it's just, wow.
Just a little reminder.
Speaking of storms, there's a little bit of controversy over at Department of Transportation.
Tell us about it.
Secretary of Transportation was pulled over last week, and he may have been set up. I don't know for sure, but
I wouldn't put anything past anybody in this town.
But if you get a couple of enemies, things are going to happen that are a little, very fishy. But anyway, last week, Secretary of Transportation Jimmy Riston was pulled over by police after someone called 911 claiming to be an off-duty officer, saying he was following Jimmy Riston and he was driving very erratically, running over on curbs, running through grass and yards, going 50 miles an hour.
Do we know if that's
Lee
true?
Street. We don't know that that's true. That person turned out not to be an off-duty officer.
Oh, really?
And it was just awfully convenient that, he may have seen Jimmy leave a restaurant or a bar, followed him, until, and I have a copy of the 911. I'll share the 911 call on her Facebook page.
Okay.
I have a copy of the 911 call. Mm-hmm. He claims to be, and he seems to be, comfortable with police terminology and 911 terminology, but seemed to be awfully convenient that he was watching Jimmy at he was even at 50 miles an hour, at the rate that he was describing this his pursuit or following Jimmy Riston, who was driving a state vehicle. It just seemed awfully convenient. It was like, this had been edited for a television show, as he chronicled the progress that Jimmy was making through Charleston. I couldn't have gone that far, at 100 miles an hour, the way he was describing the pace. And then, he, of course, telling cops where to find him as he gets on the interstate. And then cops follow Jimmy Riston in a state vehicle. Now, they did pull him over, and he did have alcohol on his breath. There was the odor of alcohol. But the test was inconclusive, and so they basically didn't have enough to get him on a DUI. But the fact remains he was driving a state vehicle after consuming alcohol, and it's against state policy.
Yeah.
He wasn't charged or cited with any traffic offense. He was allowed to go home by having someone else come and pick him up.
So the Kanawha County Prosecutor's Office is going to look into it.
Are they now?
Yeah.
Of course they are.
Oh, of course they are.
You know, the police chief said, you know, they looked into it, and I guess they'll continue to look into it. But it's a little fishy that, you know, somebody could set you up like that, just follow you along and say, hey, you know, he's driving erratically.
It's been done before,
and you know,
it'll be done
maybe
again.
he probably wasn't driving erratically, but the fact that he had alcohol in his breath in his system, driving a state vehicle is probably going to get him in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful
and the governor's
because
office,
people don't play around here.
Right. And you know, the governor was asked about it, and you know, he was troubled by it. He said, of course, you know how he talks. I would tell you how Jim Justice feels. He's very concerned. So he talks in the third person all the time.
He has a lot on his plate.
But
to worry
you know,
about
he
right
probably Jim Justice feels disappointed. So there's an investigation of the investigation, and you know, of course, he talks about how great Jimmy's been, and you know, you give people the benefit of the doubt, but you know, beyond that, if it looks like he's been driving after consuming any alcohol and that goes against state policy, it needs to be addressed.
You tickled me.
I didn't mean to. I didn't even know I touched you.
You tickled me when you impersonated the governor. That was quite funny.
It was like Mr. Haney on Green Acres, if you're old enough to remember that.
Oh, gosh. I loved Green Acres.
Mr. Douglas, what I got here is prime.
There is a House bill.
Tell us, Elisa.
4845 addressing that swatting, that you will be penalized if you start calling in things that are not correct.
Right. I mean, this happened at schools,
right.
You know, calling in fake.
And don't think for a second there's anyone that's anonymous out there, just so you know.
Oh, but it can find you anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You leave prints, you know, and if that fellow really was, he claimed he was in a black Corolla, you know, so the police would be able to identify him. And apparently he stayed in the background while the arrest took place.
Really?
And shot pictures and video, but he was far enough away you really couldn't see what was going on.
Well, and the other thing is, if you're an employee of the state, you're in any position of power or authority in the state, you need to drive the speed limit. Like, everything needs to be above board.
And he may have been driving the speed limit. This guy just claims
that he wasn't.
You have to follow the rules. I mean, I'm talking about even just having one beer.
Well, yeah, maybe not, and maybe maybe he wasn't legally drunk, right? Like maybe this guy.
Well, apparently he wasn't.
Maybe this guy did make this up, but the point is, you drank and you're driving a state vehicle. You just have to be more careful than that.
I mean, I speak at school board meetings. I speak at city council meetings. I follow the speed limit. Like, I don't want to give them any reason to pull me over at all.
Right.
Because that's what happens.
I do the same thing.
You oppose the government.
Yes.
They will come after you.
They come after you with a vengeance, especially around here. We know about that.
Yep.
Don't we?
Yep.
All right. What else do we want to talk about tonight? Elisa, you were going to give us, weren't you going to give us some updates, legislative updates?
A couple updates. I spent a few hours.
What if this has been your first legislative session where you've really been?
It's an amazing process.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
honestly
how you felt about it.
At first, when I started getting on the website, and I did want to talk about that a little bit, because that website, it's westvirginialegislature.gov.
Yes.
It's really, it seems overwhelming, but it's not.
It's not.
What I did in the beginning was I just went through the days in the very beginning of what delegates and what senators were putting out there as far as bills. And I would
bills they were introducing.
Yes. And each day they have all the bills that they're introducing. And in the beginning, it is mind-blowingly overwhelming.
Yeah.
But you just sketch read what you're interested in.
Yeah.
You can go to bill status. You can create an account.
Yep.
You can create categories. So for me, I was concerned about things that were happening with our children. So I labeled that education. I was concerned about, health things or vaccination things or whatever. So I had different categories that I created on my own, and I sorted the ones that I was interested into by number into those categories. You can go into those categories. You can highlight bills. You can give them low, medium, high priority of what you're interested in, and it actually will let you know what you're tracking, where they are. You can click on the number. It'll explain everything, what all's going on with them. And then you can go to the judiciary, which was a big one for me because a lot of the bills go through judiciary.
Yes, they do.
If you go under either Senate or House, click on committees, and you can click on then judiciary for me. There might be education, and you can see what is on the agenda that day. Every single meeting is open to the public.
Yeah.
What I found out was you can go down there, and even if you don't get in the room because maybe it's too full, but there's lots of seats around the walls.
Yeah.
You can sit and listen to it on a speaker outside and just listen to the process, or you can go in. And
it's super
watch.
cool, isn't it?
It is. And honestly, most of the delegates are super nice. They love having people down there that aren't just lobbyists that are being paid
Real
to push
people.
an agenda. They want to hear from the citizens. They want to hear from their constituents. And they want to hear what you have to say. They're super nice people. And you can email them. I get responses back. I've gotten texts from delegates. I've written them letters. I've dropped off books.
Yeah.
And I've gotten responses.
Yeah.
It's been a very enlightening process. And I think next year...
Very positive experience for you.
It was very positive. And I felt involved. I felt knowledgeable. And it didn't take that much work. Parking, you have to just figure it out.
Yeah.
But once you figure it out, I parked on the street, walked over. Once you figure out where to go.
And you know what? It's a beautiful, beautiful walk and beautiful building. And just, every time I step into the Capitol, I'm just like, this is so cool.
And the other thing that someone told me is you walk in on the first floor, go to the information center, get yourself a map.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because then that alleviates so much frustration. And we were actually going to delegates' office, dropping off papers, dropping off books, dropping off notes, information. And I just kind of looked at it as like a little adventure. And if I didn't get anything accomplished, like
Elisa Payne goes to the Capitol.
I knew where the offices were.
We're going to name it. We're going to title it.
And then the next time, I should like video this. Next time I go, I'll know where the offices are and I won't trip up.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was, they have a little
I covered it for
cafeteria.
about 5 years when I worked for public television back in the early 80s. And, it's like the Senate is on the west end, the House is on the east side, up on the second floor. And then those offices around there, are
branched off.
They're the delegates and the senators' offices, and the leadership has offices and their staff.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of people packed into a small area when you think about it.
There's two people in an office. Some of them were intimidating, but once you sat down and talked to them, they were super nice.
Yeah.
I spoke at 2 public hearings.
Good for you.
I would, things I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams. And if you're really lucky, you might happen upon an errant delegate spinning and filming herself for Instagram.
No.
I just can't imagine that would happen.
It did happen. I witnessed this with my own eyes.
That's making me giggle too.
I'm not going to say they were a Democrat or anything.
No, never.
I know we've probably just got a couple of minutes left.
He's wrapping. He's wanting me to wrap up.
Okay.
Is there
so
anything?
What I'm going to say,
go ahead.
Today, last night, Budget Tapes and Records announced that they were closing after 52 years in Charleston and Kanawha City. They also at one point had other secondary and tertiary locations in Cross Lanes and on, I think it was over at Park Place where Park Place Cinema is, somewhere one of those parking buildings. They had another location, but it's a shame they had to close. I don't think they would have closed, or I think somebody might have been willing to take it over if this construction out front hadn't been killing these businesses for the last 2 or 2.5 years.
Yeah,
and I made up a list of businesses that have closed.
Yeah, read it.
Since then, of course, Budget is closing. Then Pita Pit, The Pitch, John Cook Jewelers, Chin's, Risks, Hooters, Captain D's, Serendipity Spa. But they moved really.
Yeah.
And then La Carreta Mexican Restaurant. And I'm sure there's some I've missed, but I think the city has been remiss in not addressing this situation. It may not be all of their fault. I know it's a state highway. It's a state road project. But
I know Chad Robinson complains about it at council quite loudly. He doesn't really ask for anything.
And it was I
think the city could have been in a place to put pressure to get this done.
It's crazy.
But also, I think they could have been doing things to alleviate the pressure on these businesses, to help them with relief from taxes, maybe from B&O taxes.
And I was going to say, Lisa, isn't there an event coming up on Bridge Road where the city's going to close down those streets?
Yeah, I didn't go to that meeting, but a bicycle thing. But I was going to say, and also to Ron, what he's saying about closing business, here's the flip side of that. There's no opening businesses. Right? So if you're looking to go somewhere, you're automatically cutting out Kanawha City.
They say that, what is it, TC Energy is coming to TC Energy's already here.
Well,
they're just moving across.
It's just like that other
the river,
right? That other energy company that was up in Elkview is coming to Charleston. That really doesn't help the overall area.
But Kanawha City is hurting. It makes the administration
look good. But I think the city, I don't know we've got to go, but I think the city should have been doing something to help these businesses to kind of take the pressure off.
Yeah.
Give them a little bit of break on some taxes.
Yeah.
And maybe look for some grants to get through this.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
That's what you do.
That's what you do. That's what a good leader does. Okay,
I wish we had some.
Yeah, same. Elisa, we were going to talk health stuff, but I do want to just mention that we're gonna get on that. We need to get on the health track.
I'd love to share my story.
Do that while I'm on vacation.
Okay.
And,
all right.
I don't want to feel any more guilty.
Inspire. It's not about feeling guilty.
It's not
taking
about
control.
It's taking control, inspiring,
and
feeling better.
I haven't had control in 42 years.
Yeah, we're wrapping it up, Ryan. Ryan wants us to wrap it up.
So we're going to wrap it up, and we will see you next week. Don't forget to share us whenever you download us.
Yes, please.
Share us with your friends.
Hit
share
us up on
social
Facebook,
media.
Scoop Squad Truth Pod.
Follow
share
us
the Facebook
on Twitter,
page.
on Facebook.
Yep, and share the podcast when it comes out. All right, that's going to do it for this week's. Next week, it'll be March, and we will see how March comes in. All right, thanks for coming.
Yeah, always.
We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.
If you would like to tie your business with this popular podcast, you can contact me, Ron Hughes, to advertise at ron.hughes, ron.hughes, at wvradio.com, or you could call me at 304-342-8131.
The Scoop Squad Truth Pod would like to thank our sponsors. Those include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, featuring auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance. Pet insurance, you say? That's health insurance for your dogs or cats that covers special foods, illnesses, surgeries, and medication. They're on 16 Capitol Street in Charleston at 346-9181, or reach them at www.iigwv.com. Also by Jody's Mobile Services, offering steam cleaning, pressure washing, fleet washing, and auto detailing. We come to you. They're at 304-437-3164. And also by Eggplant on Bridge Road. Anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T-Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street, 345-4816. Go to tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery since 1984. Again at 345-4816. Rebroadcast, retransmission, or transcription is not permissible without the expressed approval of Scoop Squad Truth Pod. Copyright 2024.